Welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Monday, April 17th, 2023, and this is episode 726 of Living Free in Tennessee. It's a Monday show, so we have a number of usual segments, including Tales from the Prepper Pantry, Operation Independence, a frugality tip. There's no shopping report this week. So we'll handle all of those today. But we're also going to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, and that is that winter is over. Winter is coming, but winter is over too. And it always seems like winter kind of lingers on. And those of you who are north of me and still like watching your snow melt, I get it. Like you have a way longer winter than I do, but it lingers here too. And I think it lingers to the south of me. It's just like, I'm so excited about getting into winter and warm, cozy cups of whatever by the wood stove and all of that stuff. But then it's like, okay, ready to grow my tomatoes again. So we start our seedlings inside, and then we start them too soon. And then they get really big, and then we want to put them outside, but the nights are too cold. And then at some point, the switch actually goes. Animals start being born. We're raising chicks or ducklings or whatever. Seeds and plants are ready to go out. They all seem to need managing at the same time. And somehow when stuff like this is going on, something breaks. And we look around and we're like, ooh, spring cleaning needs to happen, right? Morels are calling loudly from the forest, which requires long hikes by ourselves with our dogs. It all kind of comes to a head at one time. So how do you handle the spring rush? We're going to talk about that. I'm going to tell you how I handle it. I'm interested to know how you handle it as well. Before we get into that, though, I do want to thank today's show sponsor and also talk about our featured event, which is Paul Wheaton's event, the Permaculture Technology Jamboree. There it is right there, 2023. They reached out to me at the end of last week and said, hey, we're going to do this buy one, get one free thing until 2 p.m. Mountain Time on Tuesday. So the Permaculture Technology Jamboree goes from July 3rd to 14th. It's a quite long event in Bozeman, not Bozeman. It's in Missoula, Montana, where Bozeman came from. It's in Missoula, Montana at Wheaton Labs, and they do all sorts of stuff. They're going to show a Spring Terrace rocket hot tub, preserve 1 million calories, do a Wafati freezer. What does all that mean? I don't know. You got to go there to find out. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of natural building, natural food preservation, permaculture things. They're going to be talking about how to, this is like heating and building with natural materials. They're going to have projects going on all day and then evening sessions. They're going to talk about things like curing meats and preserving foods. They're going to talk, the rocket mass thing's a big thing there. So lots of different things going on, as well as low tech and higher tech, all from a permaculture standpoint. Then they'll focus on homesteading topics, foraging, how to make twine, basic birdhouse, the SKIP program. I think it's a really good way, guys, to get a lot of an overview, especially if you have time. July 3rd through 14th. I'm going to be there on the early side. I'm going to be doing a session on smart homesteading, and they've asked me to do a demo. I don't know if I'm doing a demo yet or a build or a project. So I'm going to talk to them a little bit more about that. I've never been to Wheaton Labs, so I don't know what the event, what the parameters are there exactly. And so for me to do a project at Wheaton Labs, I have to think about how can I do this? And I could do cheese making or something. Then I got to bring all that stuff with me. So I'm going to talk to them about what their lower tech, high tech, exactly what their parameters are. If I can do a build while there, I'll do that too. It's going to be a really good time. I'm looking forward to checking out that whole place there. And tickets are buy one, get one free right now. So tickets are $1,250. Does not include food, guys, but I believe you can camp on site or they have places to rent. Here's a link for the live people to the buy one, get one. $1,250, buy one, your friend goes free. So that cuts your ticket price in half. And they do serve food there. It's just they don't promise food, I think is what's going on. So they usually do have meals, but it's going to be what it is. Like, I think they're trying to avoid the whole allergy thing. Like at my spring workshop, I ask people if they have allergies, and we do this whole different cooking thing. But there, they say they have food, but they don't promise food, and they don't promise to like tailor to specific eating needs, whatever those are. I think it's going to be really cool. I'm looking forward to checking out a new permaculture event that happens on an annual basis, and I love the work that Paul Wheaton and his crew at Permies.com is doing. They're also today's show sponsor, so thank you for that. Next up, I want to talk about the live stream schedule for the week. First of all, I'm going to go live right now. You got that, right? Okay. Tuesday, tomorrow, I have my 12:30 live with John Willis and Joel Riles. Wednesday, I have an interview show with Toby Truman of Discount Mylar Bags. He's going to share, he sent me some notes first for this, and then he changed his mind. So we have a couple of different things. So he has started a business from 0 to 1,000. He really built his business into prosperity using Amazon, and then Amazon changed the game. So he's going to talk a little bit about that. He's also started life as sort of a more the world is ending prepper years ago, and has come to realize that the reality of his world is that you need to build community to be prepared for the future, right? So he may cover his prepper journey. I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation to have with him, and that's Wednesday at 1 p.m. And then, of course, Friday, we have our Homestead Happenings update show at 10:30 a.m. Central. All of those you can find the links for at Living Free in Tennessee as I put out the live stream links, or come to my YouTube channel or my Facebook or my Odyssey channel. And I've been streaming on Twitter too, because why not? It's like every time I find somewhere new to stream, I do. I'll be adding some alternative places as well as we move into this year. We'll share more about that on a different episode, though. There's a whole different thing in the works right now with me that has to do with realizing I was overcommitted time-wise and needed to make some different choices. So I've been making different choices the last 6 weeks to deal with this situation. With that, it's time for our first segment of today's show, and that's Tales from the Prepper Pantry. This is where I talk about storing what you use and using what you store. Also, everybody on the live stream, if you have comments you want me to see or questions that have to do with the podcast, just put the first couple words in all caps, or I assume you're talking to each other. So I told you last week we're doing this whole deep dive into what we're going to because everything got nuked as part of the construction. So I've been doing a deep audit in the prepper pantry and starting to eliminate the things we don't really eat. I have 5-gallon buckets of wheat, which made sense when I was doing the thing with bread. I would grind wheat and I would make bread, and it would be beautiful homemade bread. I'll probably do some shows on how to do that. But then I stopped eating bread, and now I have all this wheat I store. It's not a ton. I have 4 or 5 buckets of it, so not the end of the world. But I've been doing sort of a deeper look at what is stored. We're about to have dogs bark because I don't think my mom noticed that people have driven up to the homestead. So I decided to do a deep dive into all of that. And then I have one freezer down to sort. Guys, I've got somebody at my door, and I'm literally going to have to walk off of this live stream right now because nobody's here answering the door. So hang out with me. I'm back. Now I've got to edit my audio. I hope you guys are laughing your rear ends off. Yeah, take 5, everybody. Here's what happened. Somebody asked if they could come buy coffee for me today, and they said they'd be here in an hour, and they're super nice people. And I said, sure. And an hour went by. They weren't here yet. It's like, I'll start the live stream. Mom's here anyway. She can totally help them. And like, Mom wasn't here, but now she's back. Okay, so now we're going to take a little break. What was I even talking about? I was talking about the prepper pantry. We were talking about the freezers. Okay, we're going to take a break. I'm going to jump back in, and I'm going to edit this for the audio show. So I've been going through the pantry and getting rid of the things that I just don't eat and that I don't think I'll need. And I'll probably be selling some wheat at some point, just to anybody who wants buckets of wheat. Right now, I'm keeping some of the buckets. I don't know how many. And I'm getting rid of, like, I have pasta and stuff like that. I just don't need it. I do serve rice from time to time, so I'm keeping some rice. So just decarbing the prepper pantry, because, like, the whole philosophy is you store what you use and use what you store, and you rotate it through. And what this does is supports you if you like need to depend on your pantry and can't refill it for a little while because you're in between jobs. And if things really do go wrong, it's nicer to have the food you like to eat. And my dietary needs changed a lot. I've lost a bunch of weight. I hope to lose some more. And I just changed how I eat. And I mostly don't eat seeds of any kind or very many carbs. And so, like, I'll eat potato tubers a little bit. I'll eat rice, which is a seed. Grains are all seeds. I don't eat sugar much anymore, except for when I have chocolate. So all of that has meant that the things that are not moving through my pantry are related to the dietary change. And also, I wanted to go through all my freezers, which is something I just do from time to time, especially with, like, the number of sheep we processed and the spring workshop coming. And I like to make room in my changeover freezer. It's freezer or fridge for the spring workshop. I have an event fridge. I have that one. And if I consolidate everything into the other two freezers, then I'm good to go. So I did the big one this weekend as part of the whole prep. We did the deep prepper pantry audit. I took everything out that was sort of stored there for the winter. I have a dishwasher and an outdoor sink that I use that were in my way. They're down now. The outdoor kitchen is hooked up again, so I can process food out there and not have heat put into my house when I process food. And just did that deep dive, and I didn't find anything startling. Like, I go through my pantry on a regular basis, so it was really just that I was like, okay, the whole carb section needs some thought put into it, because there's no reason for me to keep all that stuff really long term. And as a result of that, I buy half a cow with a friend. So I separated the halves of the cow in the freezer, reorganized that, made space for some more stuff that'll go in there, probably chickens. And then that will free up the other freezer that I'll be using for the spring workshop. It's always nice to get that first one done. So this is like, there's always like this pressure point where once you remove that pressure point, everything else comes easily. But that pressure point does not come easily. And one of those pressure points was my prepper pantry was ripped apart and things stirred up from having plumbing work done, because it's also a utility closet. And two was that freezer with the cow that had to be divided in half. And we used to document every cut of what was in there. And now what I just do is I take a couple of boxes and I'm like, ground, 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 steak, 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 roast, 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 rib, 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 brisket, 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 brisket. Okay. And then when one box is full, we go to the next box, and I sort of write what cuts are in the box. That works way easier and faster. So that is all done. Most of my ground beef will be gone for the year by the end of the spring workshop, because we're doing both Salisbury steaks and I'm doing my famous chili, sweet potato chili and chili. So that uses a lot of ground. And then I guess I'll have ground lamb. I guess I could do ground lamb chili. We'll see. Anyway, that's all been done. And that took some time and some effort, but that's just part of maintaining a homestead, is sometimes you got to audit the pantry. I have a use it up list as a result of this. So I always find one or two things as I'm going where I'm like, oh, be a good idea to use this barbecue sauce or whatever. So that's happening. And then I'm organizing meals between now and the spring workshop around that. I have a temporary shelf. So my prepper pantry is probably 8 feet, 10 feet wide, and I have shelves on both sides, and it's just open in the middle. And right now I have a rolling shelf in the middle of that. Here's why. When the food crew comes to cook for the spring workshop, yes, I'm talking about spring workshop a lot today because it's going to be what's on my mind until it happens. They're always like, we don't know where in your pantry things are. Now, I think it's very easy because like things are with like things, but then they're afraid that they might take the one that I wanted that I was saving for a special occasion, like high-end olive oil or whatnot. And they don't like to take the stuff out. So now I'm just going to put everything on the shelf that I know they're going to need, like lemon juice or whatever that comes up during the spring workshop. And it turns out I can actually walk around it. So I might leave it there because it's on wheels. So we'll see. I've been keeping meals pretty easy at this point because we're doing a lot of work getting ready for the spring workshop. And so my favorite easy meal right now are either lamb chops or steaks put in the sous vide at 130 degrees for an hour or two with, a dry rub of some sort, and then seared off. Basically, it takes 2 minutes to get them in the sous vide, and then it takes a couple of minutes to sear them off, and it's done. And that's been like keeping us from going to takeout all the time. Also started some feta cheese. So I got 3 gallons of goat milk from my herd share with Brad Bleasdale, who was on the show a while ago. And then I was like, I really need to make feta, but I really need the outdoor kitchen set up so we can be washing all the dirty dish. Like, it's big mixing bowls and stuff that have been sitting on shelves. You have to wash them before you use them if they've been sitting on shelves because they get super dusty. So we've been doing all that. And it's like, I can't have that in my kitchen while I'm also doing the cheese because you don't want to accidentally like get dust in the cheese or something. So totally got that done too. So that's been a lot going on with the prepper pantry. K-Monk says, I found reusable shopping bags that fit nicely in my freezer. Been sorting meat types in them. That's a great idea as long as you get ones that can freeze. Like the fabric ones freeze really well. The plasticky ones from Aldi, not so good in the freezer. They fall apart. I found that out because I was dividing lambs into those half lambs because I was selling a half lamb at a time. And I was having problems with them falling apart. So I know Nick Ferguson wants to put QR codes on bags in his freezer so he can just scan it to know what's in it. I thought that was a great idea. I would never do that because I don't know. That detailed into inventory is not what I need to do. Other people work well with that. Next up, we have the weekly shopping report, and we're skipping it this week because I couldn't find it. So I'm suspecting that Joe has it out. He's been putting it out on Tuesdays now. So we may actually move that to the Friday podcast if that keeps happening, because that seems to be the cycle he's on. And then I'm like a week in arrears whenever I read it. So we'll do that. Frugality tip is next. And this one comes from Janet. And it's all about ribbons. Ribbons. She saves all kinds of ribbons. You get ribbons on your Christmas packages or birthday presents or gifts at baby showers or whatever it is. When people are going to toss them, she collects all those ribbons and keeps them and uses them for tying up tomatoes and things like that in our garden. So in that way, she doesn't need to buy tomato tying. So it's just a waste stream she's tapped into to keep frugal. Works for her. So that's the frugality tip of the week. Next up, we have Operation Independence. This is where I talk about building local ongoing revenue into my life, as well as basically finding ways to not have to make the money to pay the person to do the thing. And right now we're in the middle of what I will call the spring garage sale season for us. Because the spring workshop is coming, we're sort of sorting through things. I'm realizing that there's a lot of stuff here I haven't used in a long time. Like I've even got an Excalibur food dehydrator on the maybe exit list. We're not quite ready to do that yet, but because the freeze dryer's here, I hardly ever use that thing, so it may go. I'm getting rid of a Carry pressure canner because I have a Presto pressure canner, an electric one. Just a bunch of stuff like that. I put a post on MeWe But I've just been posting it on Facebook Marketplace. I've been reminded how much I hate working through Facebook Marketplace. I've had a couple of really popular items with lots of messages, and then I get confused about who I'm talking to because Facebook puts the profile pic of the item for sale rather than the person you're talking to. And so then I'm like, am I talking to this, drill person or that drill person? So it's been a little weird, but we've been selling stuff there. And so that's cool. But what I'm doing with that is taking the money and putting it into my tire fund for my car because I'm getting new tires for my car. Now, I could pull that money out of my checking account, but it's kind of a fun game to play to say, well, what else can I sell to buy tires that I'm not using? This solves two problems. One, it makes space at my house because I have less stuff, and fewer things to maintain means less time spent maintaining it, which for me is a good thing, and less likely to ruin the thing because it goes on to somebody else who's going to use it. And two, I don't have to tap into my checking account for new tires for the truck. So that's been sort of a fun little game we're playing here. We are also in the midst of starting a new business unit that we've kind of talked about with the Holler Roost, where the pigs left, and in order to compost all my stuff, I would like chickens, but I do not want them running around my yard ripping up all of my things, which is what free range chickens do. So the coop is built, the run is there, the chicks should be coming soon, and then eventually 6 months from now we'll have an egg business. Now, I don't love having an egg business, so if it involves delivering eggs. So we'll see how that goes. But that's, we're going back into eggs here just because it makes sense. And the byproduct of the composting machines called chickens is what? Eggs. You may be like, hey, Nicole, why don't you just eat the eggs? Because I have duck eggs. That's why. And I really, really like my duck eggs. And so I will eat chicken eggs, but I like duck eggs better. That's just me. With that, it is time for the main topic of today's show, and that is handling the spring frenzy. I'm looking outside and there are people here buying coffee from Holler Roast, and luckily Mama Sauce is there. I'm sad I didn't get to talk to them. This person always randomly shows up around Christmas and says, hey, I want to buy 12 pounds as Christmas presents, and then we set it up for her. So one of the people she got Christmas presents for liked the coffee so much they were in town and wanted to come buy more coffee, and I was like, that's fine. I just roasted this morning, so I have a few pounds of this and that are available. So that was kind of fun. Anyway, that's part of my spring frenzy. So here's what happens in the spring. People start stopping by. They stop by to buy things. They stop by to check out the food forest progress, whatever. And that can lead to some crazy, right? So my first spring as a homesteader, I was raising chickens for the first time in my life. I was starting to plant a garden. I was trying to move away from the grocery store, so I was participating into a shared grocery buying club that no longer exists, but it used to be the only way you could get organically raised or regeneratively raised food in this area without driving all the way to Nashville. And what they do is they just get, wheat berries or whatever, shared purchase, and then we'd all go in and get our share of the wheat berries. And that's part of what moved me from a from scratch cook that does things like buy flour from the store that's already ground to I started grinding my own flour because it tasted better, or rolling my own oats because they tasted better. And when you start so we think about from scratch cooking and we think it's bread, you have flour, yeast, oil, eggs, salt, go. That's how you bake bread. Well, then there's this extra layer of from scratch where you get insane and you start making your own bacon and you start grinding your own wheat and you start growing, your actual herbal ingredients, and it goes way beyond. I call that homegrown cooking. That's what I started calling it. It's like the difference between from scratch and homegrown. If I share with you my experiences with the homegrown cooking and you're a from scratch cook, you still benefit because you don't actually need to plant the garlic, to grow the garlic, to make the garlic, to dry the garlic, to grind the garlic into garlic powder. You could just buy garlic powder, and that's pretty darn cool. When you start cooking from scratch or cooking homegrown, what you discover is you spend more time on the food, but less money on the food. And for me, I find the food that is homegrown to be more flavorful and makes me feel healthier than if I'm buying the food at the store or processed food, so particularly if I'm comparing it to microwave meals or whatnot, or the box of mac and cheese, where you put the powder on the noodles with the butter, and then if you're really crazy, you put the margarine in instead of the butter. So I was dealing with chickens and plants and the weather, and it seemed like every time I got things going, it was going to frost again, and I had to protect the plants because I, of course, had no idea when to plant what in Tennessee because I came here from Oregon, so it was very confusing. And I remember it was April. I went to the monthly grocery pickup, and I had probably bags down to my mouth, and I was kind of like trying to look like I was awake. And I was like, and she's like, "How are you?" And I was like, "Ugh." And she goes, "Yeah, spring's hard on a homestead, isn't it?" And I was like, "Yeah." And pretty much everybody who came through the door that day was also a homesteader, and they had this sort of the same demeanor. And that's when I realized that you have to start thinking of the seasonality of a homestead. Not just in terms of what grows when or when to plant this or when to do that, but also there's a seasonality of work. And spring is one of those times. Spring and fall, both those times have a lot of hours required to sort of keep up with the different projects you have underway. So likewise, it's nice to realize when the times are that you could maybe rest and decide if you're going to rest or not, because if all you do is work at a frenzy all the time, it leads to trouble. And I say this as somebody who's guilty of workaholism. I'm pretty good at keeping the frenzy going. And if you appreciate the seasonality of the homestead lifestyle, you end up in a really good place. So the spring frenzy is upon us. And this is the time of year where I'm like, "Hey, Jack Spirko, do you want to speak at the event?" And he's like, "Forget it, Nicole. It's spring. I'm planting my gardens," right? So he just says no. And if I ask him if he wants to speak later in the year, he's like, "Don't ask me now because it's spring frenzy and I can't think about it." And we're all there. We've got gardens to put in. We've got garden beds to prepare. I've already got garlic up that needs the second round of mulch. I've got wild edible plants coming on that I want to harvest and eat, or harvest and feed to the livestock, or harvest and dry for later use. I've got chicks growing way faster than I always expect, although they are not the meat chick kinds that like grow obnoxiously fast. And this year with this new variety of chicks, what they do is they take the feed out of the bowl and scatter it everywhere, and they make mountains of food on the ground rather than eating the food, which is wasteful. And I haven't figured out how to keep them from doing that. So this particular breed of chicks wastes way more food than the Cornish cross. Well, I think maybe part of that is because the Cornish cross just sits there and eats the food. And I think these guys are kind of trying to scratch in it like it's natural chick activity if it's out there looking for bugs. I've got food forest maintenance to do that. If I do not do it this spring, is really going to cause problems in the future, because having a new food forest in means you need to maintain it until you get the things established that you want established. And there are other things trying to establish that may be a little bit more aggressive than the things that I want to have there. But I really want the things I want to have there. I've got baby bunnies coming. I've got bunnies that need to be rebred. It's important to keep the bunnies on the breeding cycle right now, because there's going to be a time in the not too distant future where it is too hot outside for them to get pregnant. And then that's not, well, they can get pregnant. It's the guys who start shooting blanks over, I think, 90 degrees. Well, we get over 90 degrees and stay there for a while. So there you go. We got unexpectedly pregnant sheep. I've got a new humanure pile to build because it's time to change piles, because every spring we change humanure piles, and I have 2 and I need 3. So the third one needs to get done. I've got canning to organize. So this means the entire system of where things are stored to be able to efficiently can the food that's coming off of the garden as it comes off of the garden, so I don't end up running all over the huller looking for things that I need to do canning, which just makes the whole process take way too long. And if I do that, then I won't actually keep up on canning, and then a whole bunch of food will go bad that did not need to go bad. I have a bird with a nest with eggs in it in the cabinet where I keep all of my gardening stuff. Here's what I was going to do with that cabinet. I was going to take everything out of it. I was going to take the cabinet, which is made out of press board, and put it on the trailer of that goes behind my car and drive it to the dumpster and throw it in the dumpster because it's starting to fall apart. Now I have a bird in there who flies out in my face every time I try to get something out of that cabinet. And as a matter of fact, there are things in that cabinet I need to use for the garden. So I am just dealing with the situation, and I'm too soft-hearted to just destroy the nest because there are eggs in the nest and it's setting on eggs. Pretty soon we're going to have chicks, and it's a whole thing here. It is a whole thing here. I've got firewood that needs to be stacked up and put out in the sun for the summer so it's cured so that I can heat with it. I'm incubating ducklings starting tomorrow. Tomorrow I will have the last number of eggs, and I will have 24 eggs in the incubator, and some number of those will hatch. How many? No idea. I've got a new egg business to figure out. I've got goats. I don't need to say anymore, right? I've got goats. Strawberries need the red rocks. I have strawberries with white fruit on it right now, and the minute it turns red, my ducks and my chickens are going to be like, hey, I want to eat that. So I need to put like little things out like this Holler Roast mint tin I'm shaking. So they see strawberry-sized red rocks, peck at those, don't get anything. We trick them into not going after the strawberries. Otherwise, I have to put in the anti-duck defense system, which is a pain in my neck because you have to climb over it, and that keeps the ducks out, and then you don't lose your strawberries. I've got monthly speaking engagements, and it is, as I mentioned, wild edible bonanza season. Are you even tired just listening to that? That's what's going on the homestead for all of us. That list of what's going on in the homestead is a different list for you, or it's a different list for other homesteaders, but it's the same list. There's something they've started new this year that got to keep on. I mean, I'm just glad the bees aren't swarming right now because that's totally what would be happening if the bees were still here, but the bees moved out. So that's all going on. And the upshot is, in the midst of that, if one thing breaks, it feels like the end of the world. And I can tell you, my pump house has broken 3 times in the last month in different ways. And all the time, every time that's happened, I've been like, I don't need this right now. I need to get water to baby animals. Baby animals don't like to go without water for very long. I'm going to have to carry it from the creek. Pip and I says, that sounds like quite the Tetris game to figure out. Yeah, it is. Meanwhile, I got a coffee roasting business to run and a podcast and all the live streams to do and all the normal spring workshop in 9 days. So, yeah, it feels like a huge deal when small things go wrong. This weekend, a plastic chicken water cracked, which happens because plastic breaks down in sun, and then you put your chicken water out in the sun, and then the plastic breaks down, and eventually it becomes brittle and cracks. And I watched Tactical drop kick the thing across the yard in anger, and I was like, yeah, that looks like Spring Frenzy to me. He's frustrated because the water has broken, and it just became a football, so now it's really broken. So we're going to be buying a new water. And I used to use the metal ones for this reason because I got tired of that happening, but he doesn't like using the metal ones because if you figgle them wrong, then the water all comes out and then you have no water for your poultry. So that is what it is. Everything feels like, so that's a little thing, feels like a huge deal. Water stopping at the pump house, bigger thing, feels like an even bigger deal. Like every time that something goes wrong. When something goes wrong, suddenly we have to have a family meeting and have a talk about it because everybody's running around doing stuff. So here's the thing. If you want to get control of the spring frenzy, the first thing you have to do is what I just did. You got to reset. When you realize that you are spinning, like I just showed you how my brain works, and you're probably not liking how that felt. A reset is important, and everybody resets differently. I find a walk really helps. Today I sat in the sun for 10 minutes because I realized things were spinning. And it seems counterintuitive, but if you step back and take a little time, you'll start seeing solutions. You'll start identifying what you can do. The reason we need to have a family discussion. Family meeting is an over dramatization of the word, but like a 10-minute meeting about it when something changes is if multiple people are working on the project and one person realizes this thing has changed and it affects a whole bunch of other things. We don't even know exactly how because we don't know exactly what the other people are doing. We need to be like, okay, the water for the chicken just broke. So what are we doing to water the chickens until we can get another water that holds 5 gallons? And then we make that plan. And then, okay, do I need help for that? Or do I not need help for that? And what else has to move in order for that to happen? If you take that time, it's actually way less stressful than what I just explained to you sounds like it is. Okay. So that's one. Reset. And I don't care if that, I mean, it may mean that you have 7,000 people asking you questions and you have to tell them, stop. I just need 10 minutes. Set a timer. No questions. Unless I'm driving you to the ER, don't talk to me. Go on a walk, clear your head, and then identify the critical bottlenecks. And this is something that I've been thinking a lot about because y'all know I ripped up my kitchen and my bathroom this year, and everything is not where it goes as a result of this. And a lot of things that are not where they go, I don't even want anymore. I don't need anymore because they were serving functions that I have now replaced the serving of that function with something else as a result of the remodel, for example. And pretty much the only person in many of these cases who can handle dealing with the things are not where they go is me, because I'm the one who has to decide where they go. There's lots of deciding going on around here. But we'll run into a critical bottleneck. And then like my mom will show up and she'll say, hey, I can help you get this project done. Except for this one thing that is always in the way that only you can do is keeping me from helping you do all of these other things. So if you find the critical bottleneck on your homestead, you'll find it opens up a lot of things. And some critical bottlenecks can be, and here's how I look for it. I look for what's the thing that we're getting stuck behind all the time. And it could be getting water to the animals or getting water to the plants. That's a very usual one. You're spending a lot of your day moving sprinklers around, dumping pools, moving hoses, watering, like manually watering pots. John Willis likes to do that on his own because it gives him a chance to look at the garden. I'm going to kill my plants if I have to manually water them. So the solution is, okay, that's a critical bottleneck that keeps me from keeping the plants alive. And then I get frustrated and then I need help from other people. And the weeds actually still grow when you don't water stuff. And they take over and the plants don't do well. And then the pests come in. Like there's a whole thing that happens there. But if I automate the watering or make it easy, then I get over a whole bunch of other things and everything just kind of comes together. When we put in my food forest in the fall, Nick Ferguson was like, so we probably don't need to put in swales because there's so much water here, you'll be fine. And I was like, hold up. I'm going to have to water these, right? And he was like, yes. I'm not going to do that unless it's super easy. And so we put in micro swales so I can put a hose at the top of one and just water the whole swale, which I had to do last year because our drought went on for so long. And because of that, I could put the hose out, set a timer for 10 minutes, go in the house and do something else, and then move the hose. And that made my whole life easier. And that means that I've actually been out there thinking things are dead that aren't dead. Just today, because we put grapes in by the trees, the vining layer. Just today, I saw leaves come out on the grapevines. And I was like, you're not dead after all. Now, this poor grape got abused because we put in most of the food forest, but that vining layer sat around in pots not getting watered very well for 3 weeks at least before it went in the ground after the food forest workshop. So it could have been dead. And then we had like the coldest winter we've had in a really long time and a lot of plants died. But not that grape. Not that grape. Yeah, Michael says, I have too much to water also. It washes I have too much water. It washes topsoil away as fast as it can. Yeah, so slowing down the erosion is an important thing in that situation, which is the opposite problem that people in the desert have. well, they actually have an erosion problem too for a different reason. When they get a lot of rain, then it's problematic because the ground's not ready for it. So identify those critical bottlenecks. I had one with the reassembly of the kitchen and the mudroom the other day that I was stuck behind tactical on. So he and I will be like, okay, I'm going to do this piece and I'm going to do that piece. And then, okay, we'll go. And in order to put the things from my living room and under Taj Mahal into the mudroom where they go, I needed to have the washer and dryer in place where they go so that I could figure out what else goes in there, shelving, whatever else. And in order to get the dryer in, we needed to run the vent duct, right? Which we didn't have. So that needed to be purchased. And then, of course, the dryer had to be put in and then the washer, because if I put in the washer and dryer and haven't actually hooked up all those things and the gas, then the washer's in the way and it's hard to get up and over and do all that. So the first critical bottleneck was no dryer duct. Well, I was going to the store, so I got one. And the second was the actual hooking up of the things had to happen. And in order to hook up the things, we had to move the dryer, which is super heavy and not easy to move by myself, in there. So for 2 days, I was like, how about that? Let's do that dryer. And Tactical's like, let's move sheep. Let's do that dryer. And he'd be like, one of them looks pregnant. And then lots of time is spent at the pasture looking at pregnant sheep, not putting the dryer in place. Meanwhile, the chaos is chaosing here. Chaos gonna chaos, guys. And finally, one day I was like, here's the deal. You see all this clutter? He's like, yeah. I'm like, I can't put it away because the dryer needs to go in. So, which one of us is going to get that done? That's going to take two of us to move it in, and then we need to hook it up. And I don't want to put the washer in place, and I also can't wash clothes because the washer is moved out of place until the dryer's in, because then it's going to be annoying and in the way for hooking it up. And he's like, oh yeah, good point. And then he hooked up the dryer, and then I moved the washer in place, made sure it was level. And the minute that critical bottleneck was released, it was like, if you shake up a soda bottle and take off the lid, all the water flies out and gets all over you. Yeah. It's pretty visual, huh? So at that point, from that moment to things put away in the mudroom, like it was maybe 2 hours, everything was much better off. I was able to move my plant growing, like my seedling station, into the mudroom and get that hooked up, and the wine fridge, which is where the cheese gets aged, into there, and like everything moved out of the way. And all of a sudden we could actually sit at the bar and eat. And, it was awesome. So if you have a critical bottleneck, look for them, especially during spring frenzy season. And then the third thing is, remember why you're homesteading. Remember why you're side hustling. Remember why you're doing anything. Why? The reason I homestead is I like the connection with nature. I want a house that works for me, not a house that I work for. And I'm building a situation where I want to be here. I want to be where I want to be. I want to make a place where I want to be. I like to have the animals. I like to have that interplay with one thing to another, right? It's not very fun if you don't enjoy it. And if you're running around like a frenzied homesteader with your head cut off, you're not enjoying it. And today, I had a situation of my own making where I did not roast coffee on Sunday, and I'm supposed to roast coffee on Sunday. The reason I did not roast coffee on Sunday is we had a GSD weekend, get shit done, and people were here helping get ready for the spring workshop, which involved a lot of things getting done. And it didn't seem to make sense for me to withdraw to the roasting shack for 2 hours in the middle of that when I'm the person that has to be asked the questions. So I didn't roast coffee yesterday. I was like, I can start roasting at 3. No, people were here until like 7 o'clock last night doing things. And as a result, I'll actually do a video later and put it on YouTube. We're not all set up, but we're in a much better situation. Almost all of the construction leftover debris is gone. And we're about ready to set up the outdoor kitchen, which we will start using right away. And, it's kind of nice. We're actually ahead of schedule on setup for the spring workshop, which is unusual. But me roasting coffee in the middle of that would have stopped that progress. So I woke up today with both this podcast to do and the coffee. And this podcast is the hardest podcast for me every week. And it takes the most time. And I have to get all the lives. Like the email has to be populated. The live streams have to be all set up and like all of it. There's a whole marketing thing that happens separate from getting the show notes together. And what I've been like experimenting with is like roast on Sunday. And then I have Monday to dedicate to the podcast. And that's pretty cool. It's worked great. Did not work great. So I was like, I got to get up early. I got coffee roasted and out before mail call, which happened. And then I was really tired by noon, guys. And I hadn't done the podcast yet. And I was like, wow, I'm not going to do a good podcast if I feel this way. And so I reset. I remembered why I'm on the homestead. My dog wanted out really bad. She was giving me like big, intense eyes. And I let her out because I thought she had to pee and she didn't. She like ran straight outside, belly dove onto the lawn and just laid there and went, ah. And I was like, Cece, that's a pretty darn good idea. And I went out there too. I didn't belly roll on the ground. I sat down and I went in the sun. And I just took 10 minutes to enjoy looking around. I mean, that's when I noticed the grapes were alive, right? I looked at the food forest and just sort of enjoyed being in the sun. It's a nice warm day, but it's not too warm. Looked around at everything that's growing and enjoyed my homestead. And felt great after I did that. I no longer felt tired, came back inside and started working on the podcast and getting this ready and getting the live stream ready. And here we are, streaming a little later in the day, but it all works. Step 4 is to align your priorities with reality. So step 1 is reset. Step 2 is identify priorities. Identify critical bottlenecks. Step 3 is remember why we do this. Step 4, align on priorities. And this is the thing. It's very easy to make decisions about where to spend your time when your first goal is to keep things alive. And your second goal is to keep future things alive, right? Set up situations where it's easier to keep things alive in the future, like automating water. And then all the rest comes. All the rest. I also mean all of the rest you need to take for your body to reset itself, but all the rest of the things as well. So it's like a pun. And what I mean by that is the rest will come or it won't. And if it doesn't, it probably wasn't important. Think about that. A lot of what we do on the homestead is not important. It doesn't mean don't work hard, but realize that my whole list of things in my head is often bigger than I can actually do. And that means that I have to choose priorities. And I'm going to prioritize keeping me alive and other things alive and future keeping things alive and flourishing over a detail that, I mean, it may be visual in nature. It may be that I really do need to stain Taj Mahal. That's happening this spring. That may happen this summer because summer slows down for me, but it's not happening this spring. It'll be totally miserable this summer too to be hanging out on a ladder under Taj Mahal. But at some point I should stain it so it does not get, wood borer be eaten up and all that fun stuff. And then step 5 is bring in help if you can. I had a lot of help this weekend. And as a result, I feel a lot less stressed out because we're at a point now where I actually got some plants planted yesterday. It was great. We're at a point where we're ready for the spring workshop. Almost. We're almost set up for it. I have probably 2 more days of setup to do. And I have, shopping and cooking and that sort of thing. But like actual setup outside, I think we have about 2 more days, which is great because I have 9 days to do that. And that's because I brought in help by having a GSD weekend and people came out and helped. And it made a huge difference. Sometimes I bring in paid help. I've paid Carrie from Strong Roots Resources and Ryan Steva from homesteadconsultant.com. Both of those guys to come help with different homesteading things from time to time as I realized, like, whoops, I've overcommitted. I really want to get this aquaponics system in, and it's, I need help getting it done. It's okay to bring in help. You don't have to do it all by yourself. It's also likewise great if you can help other people when they need help. Like, it is nice to do a work exchange, because sometimes, a homestead blitz makes a huge difference. And then you get somebody over something and they can come help get you over something. It's kind of cool. And then step 6 is prioritize yourself. Remember that taking your vitamins, getting your sleep, taking your walks or getting your exercise, getting enough rest is how you make your body strong to endure through the hard work of the spring frenzy. And so, like, hitting the booze and getting super drunk and hungover right now is probably not a good idea. So that's sort of how I like to attack the frenzy. I always end up in the spring frenzy, and I always end up with the moment where it's like my head explodes, and then I reset. I look for critical bottlenecks. I take some time to enjoy the homestead, which is why I'm doing this. I align on the bigger picture priorities, which is keeping things alive, keeping future things alive, and then the rest will come. I bring in help if I can. And then I always, like, when I hit that frenzy, I'm like, that's right. I got to go for the daily walk. I got to make sure I take my vitamins every night. I organize them in my weekly thing. I've got to make sure I go to bed at a decent hour and don't get, like, off on a bunny trail and stay up till 1 a.m. reading about whatever latest conspiracy theory caught my interest at that moment. Like, it's like, okay, it's go time. We got to go. When I do this, I have to silo. So for me, this requires siloing. I have to think about this thing and this thing only for right now, even though I know there's all these other things. When I silo, I'm able to ignore all the fluff that could be like, and then I'm more successful at doing steps 1 through 6 rather than steps 1 through 3, and then getting stuck at step 2 and then never getting forward momentum, right? So I know in another month and a half or so, this springtime frenzy will be over. And the tempting thing to do at that point is to add more projects. But the best thing to do is actually think about what the fall is going to look like and see if I can work ahead on some things for the fall. Now, as I said, I'm always tempted to keep pushing more and more and more things onto the plate, but it is a trap. And it leads to what I call frenetic fall. So it's springtime frenzy and frenetic fall, right? So remember, like, all the things you start this spring also take time at the end of the project, whether that's raising and processing birds, raising and preserving plants, whatever it is, you're going to end up needing to process, preserve, sell, or something. So choose wisely. Remember your big picture goal, and don't forget to take time to enjoy the spring, because that's, like, literally why we're here doing this. Grumpy Acres has entered the room. So what I want to know from y'all after hearing this is, what do you do to handle the spring frenzy? What do you do when you realize you're in the middle of all the projects and everything needs to go on the ground at once? What do you do when that happens and then something goes wrong? Let me know. Comment section of the website, livingfreeintennessee.com. Or you can hit us up on the social networks where we spend time, which are MeWe.com and Telegram. I will say I've been playing with Snort.social, which is built on the Nostr protocol, and I'm liking it. It's a little glitchy, but I like it just from the standpoint of it's supporting the kind of things we want to support here, particularly decentralization. So check that out if you have time, snort.social, and find me there. I'm Nicole Sauce there. I will put my public key up. It's on Twitter right now, but I'll put it up on the actual website shortly. People are telling me in the comments right now what they do. Drink a lot. Yeah, see, if I do that, it's a trap, Grumpy. It's a trap. Scream and cry. That's happened. I say go kayaking. You need to go kayaking. Anyway, if you like the show and want to support the work I'm doing here, you can do it in 2 ways. 1, get your coffee at hollerose.com. 2, consider becoming a member. Head on over to livingfreeintennessee.com And I've had a second person cancel their spring workshop ticket. So if anybody wants a spring workshop ticket, go to livingfreeintennessee.com and grab your ticket, or reach out to me if you can't find it over there, and I will help you. Deborah says, when I'm overwhelmed, I pray. That's a good thing to do. Overwhelming stuff happens on the spring. Hope this episode helps you reset, establish your priorities, find those critical bottlenecks, and move forward. With that, guys, go out, make it a great week.